Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Together in This Dementia Conversation. I'm Mike Good, founder of Together in This, and I'll be your host today. Susan McCauley of myalzheimersstory.com joins me as my co-host. Hi, Susan.
Hi, Mike. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad that everyone else is here, too, and we don't have the screen of death.
I am, too. I'm not sure what was going on there, but I'm happy it rebounded, and I do welcome everybody in our audience. The first Tuesday of each month, Susan and I will discuss important and sometimes sensitive dementia care topics. Please make sure you subscribe to the Empowerment email list so you don't miss a show, and I'll provide a link to that at the end of the show in case you haven't. These conversations are meant to include you, the attendee, so please don't be shy and utilize the chat feature on the right-hand side of the screen to ask your questions or make comments. Go ahead, give it a shot now and let us know where you're from or what your role is with dementia. Are you a family member, friend, or a professional? Today we're going to be talking about grief, and we're going to expand upon the most recent Together in This Empowerment Training webinar, Give Grief Space to Breathe. Our guest today is Kim Adams of YourEndOfLifeGuide.com. Welcome to the show, Kim.
Thanks, Mike. Great to be here with you and Susan.
Yeah, it's great to have you.
Thank you.
So Kim was my featured presenter on that webinar, and I'm happy she's here with us today. So grief is an emotion that we all feel at some point, and caregivers routinely feel it on a daily basis. This is okay and normal, but as Kim says, we want to allow it to flow over us like a wave, fully trusting that we don't drown. And Susan, you and I were discussing your recent article on ways caregivers express grief, and you were telling me how grief can wash over us at any moment. Do you want to elaborate on that a little, please?
After, I can't remember now if it was before or after the webinar that I did this post, but at some point just prior to, I came across a meme that really struck me, and it's interesting that you should talk about Kim having referred to grief as being wave-like. This particular meme, I just want to read it out for you and for everybody else. It says, grief, after the initial shock of loss, comes on in waves. When you're driving alone in your car, when you're doing the dishes, when you're getting ready for work, and all of a sudden it hits you how so very much you miss someone, and your breath catches and your tears flow, and the sadness is so great that it's physically painful. And it struck me that that process can last for years, and probably, maybe it never really ends after you've experienced a huge loss in your life. That I can even, I have those moments when I still grieve the loss of my marriage, and it's been 10 years. I can look around and I see an image or a photograph, or I hear a song on the radio, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, all of those memories of that person, of the time that we had together, and the feeling of that not being there anymore it comes on like a wave. So it's not a process that's easily gotten rid of, and maybe we shouldn't be getting rid of it either. So that feeling of it comes back again and again and again, I think is one of the characteristics of grief that perhaps we need to be really aware of and carry with us all the time.
Mm.
So Kim, you have any thoughts about how that's very interesting? How it's grief isn't something that just goes away, right? It lives with us. It manifests in, if that's the right word. And it's these triggers. You never know when it's going to come out. And with caregiving, that's almost a daily basis for many of our listeners.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I love what Susan just shared because I think that it doesn't ever go away. I sometimes see it as like almost a spiral staircase, right? The intensity may get less with the waves that come, but yeah, I mean, I think it's a perfect example of, sometimes we'll hear a song or some memory or someone that looks like maybe, our loved one. So I think that the intensity decreases, but yeah, absolutely. Because grief is an emotional wound to our heart, and so we're talking about really caring for someone or a situation, or, and Susan said, a marriage, or if we're caring for our loved one. So there's a real depth of love there. So yeah, it's not like it's just going to ever go away. I think, again, the intensity can decrease, especially if we're talking about caregivers along the journey.
Hmm.
There's points along there where grief really kind of hits us. We always tend to think it's at the end after someone dies, but I think it's along the journey as well.
Right, right. And Susan?
Yeah, we were just before we went live, we were talking about how grief may be different for people who are caring for somebody with Alzheimer's disease or dementia of another kind, because sometimes I think the grieving process. Well, I know because I've heard from people and I've seen comments in all the forums that we follow, Mike, that talk about the fact that people begin to experience loss often with the diagnosis. So you get a diagnosis of dementia of some kind, and immediately there's that grieving process begins, and it's up close and personal for years and sometimes decades, and it's happening right there in front of you. It's like an ongoing death every day. You're reminded of it every second that you're with that person, and I think that really adds a whole other dimension to the stress level that care partners feel in being with somebody who is living with dementia. It's very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, Susan, I think you described that beautifully because, there's so many losses that we may not even begin to think about. I mean, yes, there's absolutely kind of the dimension, the decline, but the loss of identity of our care partner, the loss of who they were, who they are, loss of dreams, and even for us too, as care partners, kind of a loss of a support system, right? People don't know what to say and share, how to be there for us when we're caring for someone with dementia or Alzheimer's. So, yeah, there's plenty of losses that go along with that. And so it reminds me to be really focused on how the caregivers recharge themselves and nourish themselves and get support, because you're right, it's a daily thing.
Yeah, and I also think that often care partners don't think about the different ways then that grief can be manifested. And I again, in preparing this article, I came across a list of a way that grief might manifest, and in different ways. And I'll just take a second to read what some of these things are. And I know from having been a care partner myself that these are everyday occurrences. Helplessness. And that, Kim, coming back to what you said around isolation and losing support, people often feel helpless. They feel despair. They're losing the person that they love, and there's no, for many people there is no upside. I personally found ways towards healing and joy, and it's not an easy thing to do, but a lot of people feel despair, withdrawal, anger, frustration. And so there's the frustration manifest because of the grief, and also the frustration of having to deal with on a daily basis all of the challenges that go along with being a care partner. Guilt, denial, longing for what has been lost, wishing things were different than what they are, sadness, and then hopefully at some point acceptance. And so these things are, in the care partnering role, we feel them all the time, and maybe they're further exacerbated by, or amplified by the fact that we're also at the same time experiencing the grieving process as we go along.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I wonder if any of our participants or listeners would like to share any of their experiences. That would be wonderful. I know that I know several of the people that are participating here in the conversation, and it's not easy.
Yeah, please, as you know, I know we're having some technical difficulties. I think other people's screens were doing what my screen did when we started. So just refresh your browser if you have any technical issues. It might wipe out the chat, but you should be able to start chatting and get back in. So yeah, please share if you have any, comments or, anything about grief you'd like to share with us. So Susan and Kim, I'm wondering, when these waves of emotions come over us. We talked last in the workshop about some of the tips to handle that and not let it consume us. Kim, can you maybe just remind us of one or two of those? Sorry to put you on the spot, but.
Sure, no, not a problem. So, one of the first things that I share with people all the time is we've been so conditioned in, especially the Western culture here, is we don't want to feel pain. Right? We don't want to feel anything that's uncomfortable. And so grief is not comfortable, but allowing it to flow through us as opposed to trying to put our hands up and stop it, or to barricade ourselves, or to dismiss it, deny it, and all those things. Grief is an emotion of the heart. I just mentioned that. It's energy in motion. And energy cannot be created or destroyed. That's one of the principles of the universe. So if we try and suppress it and stop it, it's going somewhere. So we have this beautiful container, our bodies, where a lot of times it gets lodged or stuck. So one of the tips that I really encourage people is to really allow it to flow. So if that means crying, if that means hitting a pillow, if that means reaching out to have a conversation with someone to talk about how you're feeling, whatever that might be, to be able to allow it to move through you as opposed to have it get stuck somewhere. So that's one big piece.
I just wanted to add to that, Kim, because that's a great point. And what really helped me, just to kind of expand, is to look at, to kind of put yourself on pause as you're experiencing the feelings that you're feeling, and to really observe. I guess we call it, the flavor of the month word would be mindfulness. Uh-huh. To take time and kind of really feel the feeling instead of trying to escape from the feeling. Mm-hmm. And counterintuitively, when you stop and are mindful and aware of what you're experiencing and what you're feeling, then it helps to diffuse, or to, you may feel it intensely initially, but then it helps to kind of calm the waters a little bit. Would you agree with that, Kim?
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful way you just shared that, Susan. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Just acknowledging it, the awareness that, okay, this is how I'm feeling right now. Yeah, it will begin to diffuse it because you're now shining light onto it as opposed to trying to push it away and push it somewhere into the recesses of the darkness. So absolutely, I'd agree.
Yeah.
So
yeah, because if you push something away, then it seems to keep coming back. Yes. with more vengeance than it did before, rather than saying, yes, this is, a very, as you said, uncomfortable. It's not a nice feeling, but I'm going to go in there, into the muck and into the grime and into the, whatever darkness is there, and to let it kind of flow through, let it expand to its, to its maximum, and then it kind of shrinks somehow. I'm not quite sure how that works, but
yeah, it's about leaning in, I think, to it,
yeah,
and as opposed to running from it, because I think that leaning in kind of, you're shining the light on it. That helps to dissipate some of that energy because you're acknowledging it's there, as opposed to it takes so much energy to keep something away or push it down or I don't want to deal with it. That takes a lot of energy, physically, emotionally, to keep something away. But if it dissipates it, like you said.
Yeah.
So we got a couple of comments I'd like to address, if it's a good point. So Rob's mom is being forced into a long-term care home due to a spiteful doctor. Sorry, I didn't mean to. I just hear that so much, and it's a shame. So, what kind of advice or would we have for Rob, who's going through that struggle of literally having his mom taken away from him? Susan, would you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've talked to Rob a little bit, and
okay.
he and I have corresponded a little bit, and this is it's a really sad situation in which some care partners find themselves that they aren't in control of a situation, and that things are done that we want things to be a different way than what they are. It's essentially what it comes down to. And I think that one can take steps to fight, try to change the system, and to advocate for the person that you care for. And I also believe that it's important to put the oxygen on yourself first, and we have to take care of ourselves, because we're of no use to anyone if we become sick from all of the work that we're trying to do. So I think that there are a lot of things that are undesirable in the way that the care of elderly people is happening, and I think we have to advocate for change for the future and make it meaningful, I guess.
So take our grief and the energy and power from that and convert it into a positive force, if you will, to try to make change on a bigger kind of level, to some degree. I mean, that's not exactly what you said, but
yeah, I think so. And it may be that that we can't have, we can do everything that we can to make the life of our loved one more comfortable, even when we don't have control over the situation. But we have to create a boundary over what we can do, around what we can do and what's beyond our control. Because if it's beyond your control, you have to let it go.
Okay. I accidentally leapfrogged over Peggy's comment. It's kind of similar to one I was going to ask. So how about when the wave hits you at an inappropriate moment, such as driving or you're at a meeting? I imagine we talk about letting the grief roll over us, but that implies you've got some awareness that you're going to have grief. But sometimes it comes out of the blue, like we were talking in the beginning, right? So how do we? Kim, do you have any thoughts on how to handle those situations?
Sure. Yeah, that's such a real piece, that sometimes we just don't even know. I kind of talk about grief sometimes coming in as like either a hurricane, a tornado, or an earthquake. And sometimes it is that, something really triggers you. I think it's about, number one, kind of acknowledging, whoa, this is happening here, and also being able to kind of get a sense of, is a situation where, number one, it's safe to be able to kind of express it? Is it a space where I'm going to feel supported or get support, or if I'm driving on a highway, and all of a sudden, boom, I'm just hit with these immense tears. Well, maybe it's important to pull off the side of the road so you're in a safe place. But sometimes there isn't. So being able to just, number one, acknowledge it. And it's not about shutting it down, so to speak, but it is about acknowledging, ooh, and either removing yourself to a situation where you can, fully express what's going on. And that may not be immediate. You may be at a meeting. Well, and so being able to just kind of monitor what's going on. If you need to get up and excuse yourself, get up and excuse yourself. Or if you go, oh, there's 10 minutes left, okay, I can just kind of focus here, and then I'm going to go and acknowledge what's going on. So I think that it's kind of a both and. Sometimes there's space where you can do it, and sometimes you just might need to hold off just from the immediacy of it and get yourself to a safe space.
Kim, I think also that what we talked about earlier in terms of mindfulness and awareness can really help in those situations. So if you're in a meeting, for example, if you can identify what it is, the feeling that's happening, okay, I've just got a wave of sorrow, sadness, and just spend maybe 15 to 30 seconds just being aware of what's going on. And then, as you say, being able to then put it in a pigeonhole or a pocket for as long as it takes till you can get out of the situation. I also think that people are really understanding. I was recently at the curling club one night, and I'd experienced something during the day that had very much upset me with respect to my care partnering role. And I was in tears. And a couple of people came over and said, what's wrong? And I said, I don't want to talk about it right now. I just want to be in this space. I'm fine. I'm okay. It's just an expression. And I think that people are a lot more accepting of that these days than they used to be.
Yeah, I would agree. People want to be there. They want to support us. So I would agree.
Yeah, they do, and a lot of times we just don't know how to act or what to say. So we just need to maybe just sit next to the person, or that's the other side of grief, is being there for someone that's grieving, right? And sometimes it's just being next to them and not saying anything, or simply holding their hand, or giving them a hug. We are at the 5-minute mark, so I want to just mention to our listeners or viewers that if you have any more questions, to please get them in now, so we can be sure to try to help answer you before we wrap up. We've got some good comments over here. Judy's talking about how her husband's had dementia symptoms for 25 years, and she didn't understand it, and she fought with him, and I think it sounds like she's recently learned what's going on, and now she's able to, hopefully I'm putting words into what she said, but find that positive side of it, and and embrace it a little more better, and understand that it's the disease and not her husband, and so trying to read the chat now, but so do either of you ladies have something else you'd like to add as we start to wrap up the 30 minutes?
Kim?
Sure. So, this is such a huge topic, right? We could go on, and I think there's been some great pieces, and I see there's some wonderful comments in the chat. I just kind of wanted to address Lisa's question for a second about addressing needed grieving for another. Apparently her father has dementia, and his wife just died 49 years, and so he's unwilling for services. And I think sometimes it's so hard for us to see someone else grieving that we want to make it better. We want to get them services. We want them to feel better, so to speak. And I think it goes back to what Susan was saying earlier, that we can only control what we have control over, so to speak. And as much as we can really just offer services and encouragement, if people aren't in the space to want to move forward, then as painful as it is to watch, we just really need to let them be in that space, because we all have free choice, free will. Because really I think it comes down to two choices when we talk about grief. We can either let it consume us, or we can survive it by moving through it. And so, rationally we could say, oh my gosh, I really want, to not have it consume someone else. But that's us putting that on someone else. And so really all we can do is, as Mike said earlier, be present, be with someone, encourage them, remind them that they have a choice here, that they can move through this, as painful as it is, or they can let it consume them, and then we have to be okay with their decisions.
Yeah, the other thing that I would, a couple of things to add to that is I recently came across, well, actually not so recently, quite some time ago, but I was reminded of this blog post by Tim Lawrence. Have you heard of him, Kim?
I have not, no.
Yeah, he's works like you in the area of grief, and maybe, Mike, maybe we can include this link in the replay down the line,
Okay.
or send it out to people. But he talked about how frustrating it is when people say to somebody who's grieving the loss of a loved one that, well, everything happens for a reason. It's, well, no. Everything does not happen for a reason sometimes. And a couple of interesting comments that I drew from this post that Mike's going to include the link for is that he quotes his mentor, in fact, as saying, some things in life cannot be fixed. They can only be carried. And I thought that was so powerful. And the other quote that I took from this post is that he suggests when we're talking to somebody who's grieving the loss of a loved one, or grieving anything at all, really, is to, rather than be sympathetic, which is I'm sorry, is to be empathetic and to say, and he gives an exact wording, which is, I acknowledge your pain and I'm here with you. Not for you, but with you. So it's being in that space that person is in, and maybe Lisa, maybe part of all of the behaviors or the expressions that your father is having are actually the manifestation of grief, and he has to, that's something that he has to go through himself in order to finally get to, or maybe not, some people never get over stuff. Right. As coming back to this point, if some things cannot be fixed, they can only be carried. So letting somebody be in that space, I think. I guess we're done, huh, Mike?
That's an excellent last share, Susan, and I appreciate you sharing that. When you told me that, shared that with me yesterday, I was hoping you'd bring it back up. So yes, we want to be there with people. And so just to our audience, if I missed your comments or questions, I apologize. You can always email me and get your questions answered or comments addressed. And had somebody ask if these could be longer next time. So actually I shortened it to 30 minutes because some people said the 60-minute versions are too long. So, but for I think it was anyway. I will put up a link to the 1 hour discussion that Kim and I had a couple weeks ago, where you will be able to, there's a lot more information, and so I will pop up that link. If you haven't completed the poll I popped up on the screen, please take a moment and do that. I'd like to keep improving these workshops for you, and you should see the link to the workshop, the 1 hour workshop. Please stop by. Go ahead and watch that, and when you click that link, it will open another page for you. So with that, I'd like to thank Susan and Kim for our wonderful conversation today on the Together in This Dementia Conversations, and thank you to everybody in the audience. We are truly together in this, and I think together we can all make a difference. So again, thanks a lot, everybody. Bye-bye.